get going. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I see some new faces. And I wasn't able to be here last month. I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. on behalf of the citizens of Lakewood for National League Cities. And we went to visit your legislators, our legislators in D.C. and let them know what's important to the city of Lakewood and learn the President tends to send cabinet members. The First Lady spoke to us. So there's a lot of information, and one of the things I took away from is the city of Lakewood's pretty progressive in what they're doing. The federal government, as you know, is hurting financially. The city of Lakewood is in pretty good budgetary shape, and we're doing exciting things. Transparency, one of the things we've talked about. There's a push nationwide to get transparency, get checkbooks out on the website. City of Lakewood, I think we did that about a year and a half, 2 years ago, so you can always go online and check any finances from our checkbook. So I was encouraged to see that we are progressive in doing the right things, as well as in trying to engage citizens through the ACIC and things like that. So it was a neat experience, and the main emphasis for us was to let our congressional delegation know that community development block grants are important. They're important to our community. They do wonderful things, and those are on the chopping block, as is everything. So everybody kind of has their slice of pie that they want to keep, and that was kind of the city's slice that we were trying to make sure that that could be funded. Those kind of dollars, for example, went to Ray Ross Park. We did Ray Ross Park, and I think there's some who think it's a slush fund, that it's just a pass-through, but it's really not. There's matching grants on our side, so we actually have skin in it from the city's perspective as well as from the federal when they bring in the money. So that was great, and we have two very special guests. And before we go into that, we have Joe Margotti from from West Metro Fire.
Good morning.
One of our electeds, and we have a bunch of ACIC members. Oh, and our city clerk, Marty Greer, 2 months in a row. Right? We caught the bug.
Could be a bad habit.
And thank you. I actually had the opportunity to sit in on a presentation that Judine did on behalf of her committee, and it was really interesting, and the ACIC is doing a great job and has really done some studying and some hard work to bring to council with different recommendations. We're going to go into our program, and then we'll come back afterwards. We'll come back around and do City of Lakewood stuff and any kind of open discussion. So without further ado, Representative Andy Kerr, welcome.
Yeah, very nice.
Great. Thank you for being here this morning. I'm Representative Andy Kerr. I represent House District 26, which is this part of Green Mountain, Central Lakewood. It's basically Lakewood from all the way from the Denver border over Green Mountain from about 6th Avenue to Jewel. So it's the central part of Lakewood, and grew up here in Green Mountain, went to Foothills Elementary, Dunston Junior High School, graduated from Green Mountain High School, and then actually moved back here and was a teacher for 8 years at then Dunston Middle School. So I definitely have some connections here in the Green Mountain area, and I'm happy to represent the Green Mountain area as well as a large part of Lakewood down at the State House. We've had a interesting session, to say the least. The session started in mid-January. We go for 120 days, so by the second, I believe it's May 12th or 13th, will be our constitutionally mandated final day of session. I think most people in Colorado like to know that there's a definite deadline, and we can do no more harm after that point. So that will be only about a month from now is when the session will be wrapping up. Of course, the big news, not just at the federal level, although at the federal level their budget work is certainly taking a lot of energy and attention away, but you've probably heard too that the budget, the state budget, there's been quite a bit of negotiation over it. It's actually about 2 weeks late right now. Last night, when I left the Capitol, the Senate was still debating the budget. They were supposed to have it done and sent to the House 2 weeks ago at this point. So we're at least 2 weeks behind in getting the budget done. I assume that I haven't heard for sure, but I assume that they got it done on what's called second reading yesterday, where you actually do a lot of the amendments and stuff. And then on Monday, they'll do their third reading votes on that, their final votes, and then send it over to the House. So we should have it Monday afternoon in the House, and then we'll start debating it in the House on Tuesday morning. Actually, I have a 7 a.m. appropriations meeting. The long bill, which is the big bill of the budget, has to go through the appropriations committee first. So 7 a.m. Tuesday, we're planning to hear the long bill in appropriations and start the debate there. After it gets through appropriations, then it will go to the full House, see if there are any amendments. And so we're looking at either by Thursday or Friday, we should be able to have the budget done and ready to hand off to the governor. It's a long process. The long bill is called the long bill. I'll give you an example why. This is a good number of pages, and this is only the narrative. This is the short synopsis of the long bill, which is numbered Senate Bill 209 this year. So the actual long bill is about 4 times this size. It's sitting on my desk down at the Capitol, but obviously it's very complicated, very involved. I have a couple of numbers here. When we're talking about the long bill, this year the total operating bill will be over $19 billion is the budget for the state of Colorado. Now, a lot of that is federal pass-through money, Medicaid, Medicare dollars that really the legislature doesn't have much impact over. The place where the legislature actually has the most impact is in the general fund. And the general fund this year that we're looking at is about $7.5 billion. So it's not even a third of it's a little over a third of the total budget in Colorado. To give you a comparison, and as you know, the state of Colorado, we have to have a balanced budget. When you hear news media and God forbid you actually get any of your news off the internet, which I find more and more unreliable every day that goes by. But you other than
what you're saying is unreliable.
Unless you're watching me on the internet right now. But you keep hearing people say, "Oh, the government can't balance the budget. We're operating in a deficit." While that's true in Washington, D.C., that's not true here in Colorado. Our Constitution mandates that we have a balanced budget. We've never broken that constitutional mandate. Every year I've been in the legislature, we have had a balanced budget. And what that has meant over the past 3 to 4 years are some pretty significant cuts to every service, every program that Colorado is a part of. And for me, not only personally, being an educator and having kids in Jeffco Public Schools, not only is this personal, but I think it is a huge economic impact in the state of Colorado too, that we've done some very significant cuts to K-12 education. Now, we tried to, over the last few years, to make the cuts to K-12 education be the very last cuts. Last year, we just were not able to cut, unless you actually wanted us to just shut down prisons and open up the doors. The only place to cut getting to last year was in K-12 education, and we ended up cutting $260 million, so over $250 million was cut into our K-12 education system. And that was pretty terrible to be a part of that. And what was pretty terrible too was coming back to the legislature this year, and the first real proposal we heard about balancing our budget for the upcoming year was the governor's proposal saying that we were going to have to cut $332 million this year from K-12 education. And I'm happy to say that the budget agreement that's been worked out between a lot of the people down at the Capitol has the agreement has actually been able to lower that number to $250 million, so about the same cuts as last year. So last year, $260 million in cuts to K-12 this year, or $260 this year, $250 million cut to K-12. And while I take absolutely seriously the idea that we need to balance our budget, and we do need to do that, we just cannot sustain having a high-quality, excellent K-12 education system in Colorado, preparing our young people to go on to a higher education and go into the workforce. We cannot keep doing that with these kinds of cuts. I truly believe that in Colorado we have the resources, the natural resources, the human capital, and the infrastructure in place where we can have one of the world's best education systems. We can have one of the world's best economies. We can have some of the world's highest standards of living, and do that in a reasonable way without without overtaxing our population as well. But we can't cut our way to greatness. We can't cut our way to becoming a world-class place for people to live. So I want to let you know that personally, I have not signed on to this budget agreement that was made. I feel that these cuts to education are way too high. We just, after the cuts we had to make this year, our education system just cannot take another blow like that, another $250 million away from our kids and our future and our economic development system like that. So at this point, I'm going to continue fighting to make sure that the cuts to K-12 education decrease from this $250 billion number that is being used right now. Let me give you a couple other examples out of this budget agreement. Part of the problem that we're dealing with because of the cuts over the last few years is that the state education fund, which was a fund that was set up with Amendment 23 back in 2002, I believe, we had set up the state education fund, which was supposed to grow over the next 10 years or so, get to be a big enough pot of money that it would be fairly self-sustaining, and then able to help out our schools during economic downturns such as this. The state education fund is, I believe it's down somewhere around $20 million right now. Very inadequate